Okay, guys, this is going to be my review for the movie Inglourious Basterds. For me, I really thought this movie was very interesting, very crazy, hectic, and it had so many things going on. And what was crazy about this movie is it's like there's more subtitled scenes than there isn't. This movie in its nature and core is very much this multicultural movie in a way, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating. It's so interesting to get these different backgrounds and how these different things affect it. Because I think in America, in American sense, whenever we see World War II films or Holocaust movies, it's always, I guess, told from the American perspective in a way. And I think it's interesting seeing a French, woman and a German spy, actress, whatever, and then, seeing this other stuff with Hans Landa, which makes for the Oscar-winning performance from Christoph Waltz makes for a phenomenal villain, and I think this movie is like Pulp Fiction in the sense that it's really about the characters. It's about these characters in these situations. Similar to Pulp Fiction, each chapter is one like scene. Because like when you look at Pulp Fiction, each chapter is really one long scene. Like sure, there's other parts to it, but like each chapter in that movie is essentially one long scene. And that's kind of what I feel like with this movie, where the opening scene, the opening chapter is like 25 minutes of goodness in just the first 25 minutes. Then you get, meet the bastards and you get all this stuff, and it's just, it's fun and wild, but it also doesn't lose sight of the dangers and the realities of World War II, where it's World War II told from Quentin Tarantino's perspective, but it can still be this fun and wacky film, but it doesn't shy away from the brutality of it. And that's kind of something I felt like with, I think the biggest connection is Django Unchained. How both films can be these Quentin Tarantino films, how he makes his movies, but still really not shy away from the brutality of slavery in Django, and in this case, in Inglourious Basterds, World War II. And I think it's interesting seeing these different perspectives, where you got the American, you got the German, you got the British, and all these different perspectives of the war, which makes the scope of this film, despite it having really just a couple locations for the duration of this movie, yet the scope feels so big. Despite the couple, very few locations, the scope's so big. And there's this, and because these scenes are so long, it just is so intense. Whether you talk about the lunch scene with the French girl from the beginning, the lunch scene where he's interrogating the French girl, or you talk about the scene where the Cinderella scene where Bridget, is it Bridget? It's Bridget, right? Tries on the shoe, in that intense scene with the how it ended was very crazy. Or you talk about I already talked about the opening scene, but the scene at the bar or at the restaurant where it's like the shootout, the ball shoots the ball shootout, and what's crazy about this movie is it has such a great cast, but yet at the same flip side of that, in this movie, it has these characters are not in it very long. And I think that's kind of the crazy thing is this film is 2.5 hours long, but I think what makes these characters not being in that long was because it's really, this film is about these characters in different scenes. So if a scene doesn't have, for say, Brad Pitt, then that's nearly a quarter of the movie without him in it. Or he's in, it's just such a crazy, hectic movie. But yet I love how at the ending it all comes together. And yes, let's, the elephant in the room of them rewriting history. Many people criticize them rewriting history. because like, oh, if you didn't know that this didn't happen, then it could, it's misinformation. But the way I look at that is the same as I look at any movie. It's not the movie's job. It's not the movie's job to inform you about what happened. If you don't know that every major Nazi was killed at this fictional party, then I don't know. I don't. Why would you be watching this movie? Because the only people I can think of who would be like this are people that are uneducated or just kids who don't know this stuff, who aren't at the point to know this stuff, that know all the that Hitler was not killed at this party, and I think at the end of the day, it still gives you an entertaining experience, and I think Quentin Tarantino in interviews has described it best. This is World War II fan fiction. That's how he describes it. It's a fantasy. It's yeah, World War II fan fiction, because the reality is we see so many World War II movies focus on what really happened. Whether you look at a Saving Private Ryan or a Schindler's List. These films focus on what happened, real events during this time. But this film focuses on what could have been. And I think Quentin also describes it as what would have went down if these characters existed. Because the reality is, it's all, despite it taking place in World War II, it's all fictional. You know, Bridget von Hammond doesn't exist. Aldo Rainey doesn't exist. Hans Landa doesn't exist. Shoshana Dreyfus doesn't exist. Archie Hitchcock's doesn't exist. So I think Quentin Tarantino describes this movie as what would have went down if these characters existed. And I think at the end of the day, it's a movie. And I think if you don't know the difference between what happened in this and what was different in this movie, it's a slippery slope, no doubt. But it's never a film's job if we make this film and we do something that didn't actually happen, suddenly now we have to change. And I think Quentin Tarantino is such a bold director that I think this is I think Inglourious Basterds is one of the most boldest movies I've ever seen, because it really draws the line between what can happen in a movie, and I think for me it works. It has a great cast, and a great international cast, across, all over. And so, yeah, I mean, overall, really, really had fun with this movie. But also at the same time, thought it was very intense, very crazy and hectic, and yeah, and it was just so unique. It's so unique, this movie. The way that it all climaxes to this event, and you see one scene that's 30 minutes long, another that's 20, and all these great detailed characters, whether it's and especially a diverse character where you get a German spy, you got a Nazi, you got an American these American bastards. At the same time, you see part with Mike Myers and Michael Fassbender, you get an insight on the British, and all this stuff. You kind of culminating to this very, very fun and interesting movie that still, despite it being, yeah, I said fun, it doesn't shy away from the brutalities of this era in multiple ways. And, I thought overall I enjoyed it. And was very fascinated by this movie. Where does it rank with the other Tarantino movies? I still think Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained are better, but it's third, and and I could make a case for why it's the best, or I can make a case why, or I can make a case that any Quentin Tarantino film is the best of his films, Anyway, stay tuned for videos coming at you.